This podcast is brought to you by Mapper Forward's new Patreon community, the Global Coffee Think Tank. Check the show notes or head to patreon.com/mapperforward to find out how you can become a member today. Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Mapper Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and we have started a new series. I am very, very excited about this conversation. This is a discussion with my friend, Jimmy Canali, and we are talking about this new era of the coffee industry and how we lead through this new era of the coffee industry. Some people might be listening and saying, what do you mean by this new era of coffee? Coffee industry is undergoing changes that we couldn't have foreseen 5 years ago. We've been impacted by a pandemic. We are now being further impacted by economic change and climate change, as well as social justice change and cultural change are all impacting the coffee industry at an increasingly rapid rate. Recently, we had Andre Eierman on the podcast, and Andre and I had conversations about the gap between commercial coffee and specialty coffee. This series is with Jimmy Canali, and Jimmy, you are a store manager at Starbucks.
That is right. I manage out in Aurora, Colorado.
And you have been on the podcast a couple of times before, and we always have fascinating conversations. So thank you for coming back, and thank you for having this very brave discussion with me about this subject.
Thank you for having me.
So in today's episode, as we traverse this idea of leading through an era of change in coffee, we want to talk about what has changed about the coffee industry in the past 5 years. So I guess we want to kind of include in that what was changing before the pandemic hit, and then how did the pandemic influence that? And you being from, I guess, what we consider it a commercial coffee industry, like Starbucks buys specialty grade coffee, but it's a hugely commercial endeavor. So in your experience from the commercial side of things, and you having navigated through the past 5 years and having seen the coffee industry shift and change and try to figure out where the new equilibrium is, what have you seen that's changed about it from 5 years ago till now?
Well, I think 5 years ago, do math, we were in 2018, and I think there was kind of the peak of a lot of businesses. So from third wave independent shops to Starbucks, I worked at the roastery. And just on a revenue standpoint and a business standpoint, I mean, we were flying high, and I think a lot of different players were at their peak. And I think the last 5 years has dislodged the voices who were influential, that kind of power or that structure that a lot of people were living under. And I mean that broadly over the whole coffee industry. It has dislodged the way we did things. It has revealed the kind of emotional unsteadiness of a lot of people, a lot of leaders, and a lot of businesses. And it has definitely revealed whether or not we were prepared as individuals or as businesses for this amount of stress. And so I think Starbucks has pivoted, and we'll talk through this. And again, I speak from my own perspective. I don't speak on behalf of Starbucks. And Starbucks is so big that it is hard to say just one thing anyways. But in my perspective and my observations, I believe that Starbucks has really found what it wants to focus on. And that is the individual barista, who we call partners. All employees are partners. The barista's experience. So what is the experience from the very bottom of the company upwards?
Have they found a better way to do that 5 years from 5 years ago?
So I think when you're riding high on success and um, you're making money the way maybe Starbucks was. I think there's things you value and you focus on, but you're running at a different pace. And I
Hmm.
think the pandemic and how much it shook people up and what they needed for safety, what they needed for their emotional and mental security and health, I think it revealed that there was a lot more need in the area of how we care about employees than anyone could have predicted. And I think 5 years ago, there was a lot of things in place with our benefits. You had different mental health benefits, free headspace, therapy, counseling. But the pandemic revealed just how much more we needed. And so I've been part of and witnessed the effort of a big company moving in that direction of mental and emotional well-being of everybody. And why I can say like we're learning from our mistakes. So it's not like Starbucks has this figured out, but there is an effort to move the whole company in that direction to really care for the individual and give them the substance that they need.
What about from the consuming end? What do you think has changed in the industry from the consumer's perspective?
I think we're right at a new chapter, but I would say this last year prior to kind of 2022,
Hmm.
um, the consumers also went through a panic attack of caring about safety, caring about health. And I think a lot of people took their coffee experience home.
Hmm.
Starbucks customers, again, my perspective is, and from my little cafe that I work in, is people wanted to be at the cafe. And so when certain mandates lifted, it's like people loved just being in the cafe again. And there, again, my perspective, there wasn't a huge like, let's just go make Starbucks coffee at home as much as I want to be part of the community that Starbucks has. And I'm speaking for my own store. And so I think that need for to be out in the community and be part of something is really big. And I think that's what will get explored in this coming year. It's like, what do we do once we're out in the community? What do we do once we're in coffee shops? Coffee shops used to be called penny universities in London, mainly just for men. But when they started in London, like it was a place of education. And we know they're a great canvas and sometimes a dangerous canvas for like social movements.
Mm.
And so, speaking from personal experience, um, but I think the canvas of what a cafe can be re-explored. And so that's stuff, I'm slowly doing with my team in Aurora.
Do you think the customer is aware? Well, let me say it this way. Do you think that the customer and the professionals on either side of the consuming end are aware of the shifts that have happened over the past 5 years? So do you think that the consumer is aware of the challenges that the professionals in coffee are experiencing and the businesses in coffee are experiencing? And do you think that the baristas and business owners are aware of the challenges that the consumer is experiencing?
I'll try and speak like globally to the coffee industry and then to my own store. I think
Sure.
they're different. I think 5 years ago we cared as an industry, especially coffee industry, a lot about origin, a lot about our shot times, a lot
Mm.
about all the things that make the quality amazing 100-point coffee taste like the God shot that
Mm-hmm.
everybody wanted. Some customers cared about that. Most people did not. I may or
I'm
may not
shocked.
have most people at my current cafe. And even working at the Starbucks roastery in Seattle, that was a great entryway to especially coffee world because it was just an easier way to bring people in to wow them. But it wasn't just about the coffee; it was about a total experience.
Mm.
And so the agreement was they're going to be wowed and we're going to wow them. In my little cafe in Aurora, it's about just connection. And I think we're both on the same page with that of my baristas wanting to create that connection, get really good at diving into how do you do that over the bar and in the cafe. And customers want that. I think where as a big company and being in the company operated side and not on the roastery side now, uh, it is, we are more removed from a lot of the problems outside of just our store. So where the
Mm,
specialty coffee world is a little more ingrained, maybe with some of the problems going on in the farm or how to get customers into their building. I would say my store and being with Starbucks, it just doesn't seem that way to me. I would say most of the industry has kind of shedded some of the skin of just caring about the quality or the shot time or the best way to roast it as far as what we're sharing with customers, or they need to, because I think it needs to go deeper into actually listening to each other, listening
hmm
to the customers that are in front of you, and maybe listening to your just town or city that your cafe's in. Be to really ask the question of what kind of canvas does your cafe need to be for the place that it's in? Because I think each place is different. If you're in maybe college town or a place where a lot of people really care about the things that coffee professionals care about, that's great, but most places aren't. And I think there's ways we can still educate people, but I just don't think it is the way we need to define our cafes. And I'm just speaking for everybody.
mm. Before we dig deep into all of that, I'm going to resist the urge to dig deep into all of that because that's what we're going to do throughout this series. But the other thing I want to ask you how it's changed over the past 5 years is the product and product pricing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have control over that at Starbucks, but I would say as Starbucks has answered the call on what their employees, what their partners want,
Mm-hmm.
and what the other industries, all the products that, as everything rises in price, obviously we've had price increases too. I can't fully speak to the decision making behind that, but I can say like that is currently disrupting, I think, customer experience
Mm-hmm.
all over the place. And I think we're gonna have to really dig deep into as an industry as a whole of going, well, how do we be successful and how do we continue to create an amazing customer experience when our customers are decreasing? Um, yeah, I'll
Because
leave
I
it there.
assume that Starbucks is experiencing a decrease in customers like the rest of everybody else is, right?
In some ways it was, I mean, there's so many different cases. Again, I can speak for
Yeah.
my store, and I would say we're growing year over year.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think 2 years from now would be a good indicator, but we're still growing
Mm-hmm.
and people are getting to know us. And there's still a lot of room to win customers, even in a place where I think our cafe's been open over 15 years and we have some customers who've been coming to it. And that's really long as far as Starbucks goes, to have a cafe only, no drive through, that's still standing. And so we're still have the ability to win people to our store. And
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah, awesome. I appreciate you laying the foundation for the rest of our series. In the next episode, what we're going to talk about is how commercial coffee has navigated change through the last 3 years, because you and I had some conversations on this podcast as you were going through some pretty gnarly times through the pandemic, and Starbucks was going through some interesting times. And we as an industry have been through very interesting challenges. I'm using the word interesting a lot, but I think it fits, over the past 3 years, pandemic and geopolitical, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So in the next episode, we're going to dig deep into some of how the foundation we've laid today has been explored through those challenges. Thanks, Jimmy. We'll see you in the next episode. Peace, love, and peanut butter, everybody. Have an amazing rest of your day. Thanks, friends. If you enjoyed this video, here's what you should check out next. Consider supporting Map It Forward on Patreon and be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell before you leave.